On this episode of the Athletic Potential Podcast, we're going to deviate from our normal question and answer sessions and actually go with an interview. This interview is going to be with Spencer. He's my Doctor of Physical Therapy student from the University of Utah, and he and I are going to dive deep into the world of youth sports specialization, whether it's good, whether it's bad, and whether our athletes should be specializing in sport at an early age. So, welcome to the podcast, Spencer Roos. Welcome to the Athletic Potential Podcast, your place to come and get answers to your athletic development questions. We cover a range of topics, all related to helping you to achieve your athletic goals so that you can experience and enjoy the athletic career that you deserve. I am your host, Dr. Mike Matthews. Hey, Spencer, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here. Thanks, Mike.
So, people don't know you because you've only been here at Athletic Potential for a little while, but introduce yourself to everybody, what you're doing, why you're at Athletic Potential, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I'm Spencer. I am a physical therapy student at the University of Utah. I'm at Athletic Potential doing some of my full-time clinical rotations that are with our schooling, and I'm ready to get talking about our topic today.
Well, jumping right into our topic, we get a lot of questions at Athletic Potential about when is it that my athlete, usually from parents, right? When is it that my athlete should only play one sport? Should they specialize as soon as they can? Should they specialize late? When should they do it? That will give them the best chance typically to be successful at the level they're at, but also continue to climb the ranks up into, hopefully either collegiate or professional. And today we are going to talk about it because we're nerds and we like to answer those questions based on what we think, but we also like to read a lot of research. And so what we're going to do today is cover what the research said a little bit and what we feel like, and essentially what we believe here at Athletic Potential, athletes should be doing to give themselves the best chance at making it to that collegiate professional ranks. And we're going to use it through the lens of should they be playing one sport, their sport, early on. So, Spencer, I'm going to have you start with this. So let's just say a client walks in the door, they sit down, we've got a 11-year-old kid sitting on the table. Let's just go baseball player, 11-year-old baseball player sitting on the table. Mom's sitting there, dad's sitting there, and they go, hey, he's playing baseball, but we have him currently playing basketball in the winter, and we have him playing baseball in the spring, and then he plays some football in the fall. Is that the right thing to do? What would you say to them, and then back it up with what you've got?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, when it comes to specialization, there's a lot of research that has been done on youth specializing in different sports, whether they're younger or older as they get into high school and moving on. But I love that, especially if like baseball is their primary sport and then they play the other sports throughout the year. It's just a great way to meet new people, become a better teammate, and get to have some fun doing a lot of different things. And when it comes to specialization in a sport, especially as they are younger, still growing and still learning, like whether baseball is their primary sport or if they want to do something else, I'd like to encourage the playing multiple sports just because the research recommends it actually. The research says like playing multiple sports and participating or specializing in a sport earlier on can actually increase your risk for like injuries and dropout rates. So some studies found that playing in one sport and only that one sport throughout the year can actually show that it has a negative effect on quality of life and burnout. And they actually found some studies where they're more likely to drop out of that sport compared to people who play multiple sports throughout the year.
All right. So I think you touched on a couple of things that I would like to touch on. And the first is you had mentioned primary sport of the athlete. At 11 years old, when I talk to parents, a lot of parents will be like, oh, yeah, I think their primary sport is baseball. Or, I mean, we're biased here a little bit because we see a lot of baseball, softball players. But they're like, yeah, my primary sport's baseball. And I'll always ask the parents, I'll be like, how do you know they're 11? Is that all they want to play? Is that, are they locked in on it? Do they not like any other sports? Have they tried other sports? And those are all key questions. And for the most part, the answers I've gotten, and I think they vary for everybody, and the answer is, well, it's just the sport they really, really enjoy. They're like locked in on it. They love watching baseball, playing baseball, all those kind of things. It's their sport. They love that sport. And they tell me, like, hey, and I remember it's an 11-year-old kid. They tell the athletes telling the parents, like, well, I don't want to play anything else. I just want to play baseball. I'm all in on baseball. So that's a parent response. If a parent comes to you, Spencer, and says that exact same thing, was like, well, my son says he's all in on baseball, like, doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in playing football or basketball or any other sport, really, he just wants to do baseball. How would you respond to that?
I mean, that's a great question, and it definitely happens because I'm not a parent, but honestly, I feel like just having your kids play multiple sports and be able to be outside and trying different things is crucial. So I personally I definitely would fall into the specialization category early. And I had a very just small group that I was playing with, and those were my only friends. It was very just small knit, and I didn't get the chance to really try out a whole bunch of sports. Granted, I only wanted to play baseball, but I feel like I could have done a lot better if I had played another sport, gotten to make new friends, gotten to try new things, just because being able to try something like basketball or football or volleyball or soccer or something like that, I think it would have made myself a better athlete and would have made me a better baseball player just in the long term.
Yeah, yeah, you make a good point. It's just so people know that Spencer played collegiate level baseball. So when he says specialize, he specialized in baseball early. So, but the idea is, and I love that question, and because I get to talk to the parents a little bit, and I always tell them like, well, first and foremost, I usually tell the parent, I ask the parent, hey, what was your experience? Did you play multiple sports? Did you play only one sport? Right? Most people know my background, but if you don't know my background, like I played baseball all the way through college. I can tell you I played multiple sports up to high school. And I look back on it and think there's probably no way I would have done as well as I done had I not played multiple sports in high school or up to high school. And even I guess through a little bit of high school, I still played another sport besides baseball. But coming back to the question, the parents will say that, well, he just, that's all he wants to do is play baseball. I always come back and for those that are readers, and it's a bit of it's not an old book now, but it's definitely been quoted a million times and it's been out for a long time. The Malcolm Gladwell book called Outliers, and in there they talk about this 10,000 hour rule. Like you need 10,000 hours to become an expert in whatever field or whatever subject you're talking about. And there was at the time it came out, a lot of parents and I think I was just a brand new parent when that book came out, and I remember thinking like, oh man, like more hours into something the better, and that'll get them to these expert levels a lot faster. And what we found with athletics, using that 10,000 hour rule as an example, is what we found with athletics is that any athletic endeavor counted towards those 10,000 hours when we're talking about youth. And that is because all you're trying to do is take youth and develop their entirety of their athletic skills. And so a lot of people are like, well, they need to put in 10,000 hours of baseball. That'll make them an expert baseball player. Unfortunately, what I think that ended up doing is it made really good throwers, but not really good athletes. And what we found is, and Spencer already alluded to it, is that when you become a thrower only and not an athlete, you start becoming susceptible to burnout. You highly susceptible to injury. And I actually think it limits your ability to continue to progress in the levels of the sport. Now, I know there's a million people that will be like, well, what about this guy? What about this guy? This guy did it. This guy only was playing since he was 8. My favorite example is the Tiger Woods analogy. Tiger Woods was playing, golf since he was 5 years old. That's all he ever did. And I'm like, yeah, until you realize he actually played multiple sports, but just at a different level. Yeah, he sold out for golf, but he still played multiple sports. I mean, what was the other one that we use the Dominicans example, right? So these players that play in the Dominican and they're signing contracts at 16. Julio Rodriguez. I mean, I don't like dating the podcast, but we just saw the Mariners get eliminated from the playoffs. But Julio Rodriguez signed a contract when he was 16. He's been playing baseball since he was, I imagine, since you could pick up a rock, and start throwing it around. There's some interesting things about those that come out of the Dominican. One, they don't have a lot of opportunities to play other sports because there isn't a lot of organized sport outside of baseball in the Dominican. And maybe I'm wrong. Somebody from the Dominican can correct me, and that's fine. But if I'm right, that's kind of what they grow up playing that because that's most available. And then the second part is let's take David Ortiz, extremely Hall of Famer for MLB. He played baseball since he was a kid, but if you asked him, he would have told you he was a way better basketball player growing up. So he played high level basketball and would have rather just continued to play basketball. But there was nothing, as he put it, he couldn't make money playing basketball. There was nothing, no availability, so he chose baseball, and he's a Hall of Famer. So he helped develop these athletic skills. So I always tell the parents, I say, look, if your kid is like just bent, I love baseball, that's all I want to do. What I would tell you as a parent is think it from an educational standpoint. If your kid goes into school and he's like, dude, I am a math nerd. I love math. I love math. It's like, I love doing everything math. That's what I want to do. You're going to be like, okay, cool. You don't have to take English. You don't take history. You don't have to take social studies. You don't have to take all these other academic subjects, right? No. He's got to learn to read. He's got to learn to write, he's got to learn all those other basic skills, and that's required. And what I would tell a parent is like, we should do the same thing in regards to sport. There are certain athletic qualities that need to be developed as they're growing. And the best way to do that is through playing a wide range of sport. I believe the research always says it's a wide range of athletic exposures, which I always thought was kind of like this crazy way to say it. But when we talk about that, it's just playing multiple sports. And so I highly recommend that to all my athletes. Most people listen to podcasts know that I have kids. I have two daughters, and both of them are playing multiple sports right now. And it was a requirement. Like both my kids are in tumbling. They were required to tumble. And the reason why they were required to tumble is it teaches them body sense and awareness, as well as the ability to fall without getting hurt, which I credit Dan John, my mentor, for that. He was all over that and he nailed it, because I can't tell you how many times my 9-year-old, literally 2 days ago, on a scooter, hits a rock patch, goes flying, and instead of landing with her arms just completely straight out front, what does she do? She lands on her elbows and rolls. And I just was like, thank you, Dan. But anyways, it works. And so, but they were tumbling and doing, gymnastics types activities until, my 9-year-old just stopped. My 13-year-old stopped when she was 12. And they both play. My 9-year-old plays soccer and softball, and my 13-year-old plays softball, and she'll be playing basketball here in the winter. So I don't know. I always tell the parents, look, if there's just, that's all they want to do, like as a parent, we're probably going to have to step up and say, hey, let's go get a group of other parents whose kids are maybe in the same boat. I mean, I play basketball with all of my friends on the baseball team. We just formed a basketball team because we all liked playing sports, and so we all just played together. So maybe that's what you got to do as a parent, and go out and facilitate, because kids are going to want to hang out with their friends. So go facilitate that. Go facilitate hanging out with their buddies, but playing a different sport, learning different things. And it's okay if it's rec league. It doesn't have to be competitive. It can be just something else to do. So anyways, I kind of went on a tangent there, but I think it's important to note that a lot of parents they come to me with this, my kid only wants to do this. And I go, well, if my kid only wanted to drink Mountain Dew and eat, Lucky Charms for breakfast, I'd probably be labeled the worst parent in the world if I said, yeah, that's okay. You can do that because you really want to, It just doesn't work that way. I think we need to be similar to our athletic exposures, helping develop our children in a way that will give them the best chance to become, a good athlete in the future, but not only a good athlete, just a good mover, a good, I hate to say good human, because there's a whole lot other things that go into that. So anyways, so now parents like, okay, I'm in. Yeah, they're playing multiple sports. This is good, right? What does the research say? Is there a specific age the research is like, you've got to hone in at 15 or whatever? I don't know, pick an age. Is there a research age out there that says this is when you have to specialize?
It's it's definitely there's definitely not like a specific age. I mean, there's some research that talks about how specializing when you're younger, like before high school, where you're still like in the middle of growth spurts, specializing at that age can be um, not ideal just because of the injuries that could come along with the growth related pains and the growth related injuries due to just what we call specializing, doing the same movement, like baseball players throwing a baseball over and over and over and only doing that throughout the year, especially during times when they're growing so much. I did read an article that said they they talked about specializing during high school can is better than earlier. But I still like the idea of playing different sports throughout high school just because you're still playing at a competitive level and you're learning how to be an athlete, learning how to compete, be a team player, especially at a higher level, which would be high school compared to maybe a rec league when you're younger. But yeah, that's not, I wouldn't say there's a specific age. It's more of like try to time it up with when the kid or when the child realizes like, hey, maybe I'm not ready or I'm done playing this sport, but it's also like maybe it's not they're necessarily done growing, but they've played multiple sports for a while. They're in high school, they're getting ready to get recruited for their primary sport. Like maybe that's a time to start specializing on that sport, but I don't think it's giving up all other sports just because of that. I think I read an article that talked about it was talking about Tiger Woods and a couple of professionals. It's not that they didn't play, it's not like Tiger Woods only golfed, he played other sports, but it wasn't necessarily at a competitive level. They called it deliberate play. It's like unstructured, unfunctioned. It's grabbing a group of guys and going out to a field, playing football, playing basketball, just doing stuff like that throughout their youth growing up.
You bring up what I think is becoming a very much a lost art in the long-term athletic development of our kids, and that is the word play. So I'm going to define the word play the way I just have just been described to me, as well as I feel like it is probably the best descriptor of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I know a lot of people would be like, "Man, you're going really over the top in regards to the word play, right?" But when we talk about sports, like there's a component of play that needs to happen. Now, when I say play, this is, you're talking about athletic endeavor. So we're going to talk about athletic play. We call it whatever you want at that point, sport, whatever, it doesn't matter. But when we talk about play, play is quite simply this: it's no coaching, no coaches, no adults. The kids are together. They can make up a game. They can play whatever game. They can play the game. They can play, basketball, baseball, volleyball. It doesn't matter. They can make up their own game. But the point would be is that it's play. It's unstructured, and as I always say, it's unencumbered and what's the word? I wish I could remember. It doesn't matter. But it's just there's no influence from adults. There's no pressure to perform. There's going to be no debrief after saying, "Man, you could have done that better," from a parent. None of it. It's literally parents are not involved. They're not there. They're not involved. It's not a big deal. They're just out there to have fun. And it's one of those things that, as organized sport has really taken over, is play has become a thing that the reps that happen of this kind of free, open, whatever play have gone down dramatically. And I think we're seeing, to an extent, some of the injury rates have gone up, maybe because of this lack of play. But one of the things that I think we definitely are seeing because of this lack of play is the inability for the child to be able to go and participate in a sport for enjoyment purposes only. A lot of them are out there saying, like, I've got to compete at a certain level. If I don't compete at a certain level, I'm going to not be able to make my next comp team or whatever team. They're like, I've got to do this. I got to do this. I've got to do these things. Right. And what we found is that a lot of the time these athletes are they're worried that they're not doing the right things. So they're like, I need someone to always tell me what to do. And it's not what this is meant to be. So I think play is a big deal. And I think it needs to happen. But I want to define what play is in regards to sport. And play is playing a sport without the influence, the presence, or the feedback of adults and coaches. If you can do that with your kids and facilitate that in a way, I think what you're going to find out is that your kids will enjoy moving more. They'll just have a lot more fun, and they'll build these athletic skills that it's hard to build without just being allowed to be kids and just play. So thanks for bringing the word play up, Spencer. That's one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about. And that is, it's a big concept. So, okay, next question. So we kind of talked about like specialized age, maybe towards high school. And I already can hear the 20 parents I've talked to just in the past 3 or 4 days being like, yeah, that ain't going to fly. That ain't going to fly because if my kid's not on this team at the age of 14 or 15, they're never going to get a chance to go to these tournaments and get exposed and get recruited and make it to the next level. So there's no way we're going to be able to do that if they're just not specializing until 16, 17. And I know you said 15, but let's just stay like 13, 14. We're getting it right now. Okay. Now, for those that don't know, I have a 13-year-old playing competitive league softball. And so I'm in the midst of it. Like I'm swimming in it. Okay. And I feel for all parents. It's a crazy world, but I get it. Like there's a lot that goes into this. And what would you have to say, Spencer, about the parent that does come back and says, yeah, if they don't specialize, I'm being told by a coach that if they don't specialize by the age of 14 in this sport, they're never going to get a chance to play at the next level. They just won't have a chance. What would you say to a parent about that?
I mean, they bring up valid points because I mean, the thought is that if I specialize younger, or if their kid specializes younger, that they'll be able to become better at that specific sport. But I feel like we've kind of mentioned it so far, like the research just it doesn't support it as much. Like I'd still say like they don't have to play like multiple competitive sports. It's joining a team that's like it's joining a rec team during the off season, but you're still practicing your primary sport. If that's softball or baseball or soccer or something, you're still doing soccer throughout the year. It's just you're not doing it as much as a competitive level. It's playing, or it's still doing your drills. Still doing your soccer taps, or you're still throwing a baseball, swinging a bat. It's still participating in the sport, just not as competitive as you would during your season. Because I mean, a lot of seasons you'll have, or a lot of sports, you'll have some off seasons where you'll be able to get the time to play another sport, or even if it's playing with a group of friends doing something else. So I think that that's part of the answer to that, but then also playing another sport will develop a even better athlete. I mean, you'll get to learn new skills, and those skills tend to transfer over to make you just a better overall athlete and make you a better athlete in your kid's chosen sport that they wish to specialize in.
Yeah, I I couldn't agree more. Like in the sense that we've talked to a lot of players, especially this time of year, where they're like, and we'll go over specifically softball, baseball, so throwing sports, right? And so they'll say, well, we're ramping down. We don't have hardly any more tournaments. It's the winter, and I mean we're in Utah, so it gets cold, it gets snowy, it's tough to be outside. But a lot of times they'll say like, so we're going to take a month off of throwing, right? That's what we should be doing is stop throwing it all entirely. Like that's what we've heard, right? There's a lot out there that says like, yeah, you should take all these times off of throwing. And this is where I've gone back and forth for the past 10 years on what we should do here. But Spencer, you answered the question already, and that is this. In seasons, I like athletes, youth athletes to be playing sports that are in season. And I know a lot of people are like, well, there's fall ball. And I always say fall ball is for the kids that don't get reps in spring and summer because of either injury or new to the sport. Fall ball is not a bad option. Or maybe like you just formed a new team and you're trying to bring this team together because you're going to go play some high level, baseball or softball in the spring. So you're trying to bring your girls or your boys together as a team a little bit. Okay, maybe there's some merit to fall ball. But realistically, fall ball accomplishes not a whole lot in regards to getting you recruited. Like, and I know somebody will give me an example, and that's fine. But for the most part, nobody's getting looked at in the fall. Nobody's, being told that they're, if they're not out in these tournaments, they're not getting recruited. And I understand that tournaments do exist in Arizona and Texas and Florida, and Alabama that exist. That October, there's some stuff, and I I'll go on a tangent in regards to those and those showcases that happen in November and December. But I can tell you right now, like if you go to a showcase in November or December, know this, like they've studied it, the risk of injury rate goes up not by 2, but almost 3 times the amount if you're participating in showcases. And so it's one of those like, unless it's your last resort, I wouldn't be doing showcases in the off season. Okay. Now that being said, let's talk about off season. So now October rolls around or November rolls around and we have patients or clients asking us, hey, should I stop throwing? And I've gotten to the fact now where I don't really like a lot of our players to stop throwing unless they've had a very high volume of throwing coming into the fall. What I tell them to do is you're not going to do any competitive throwing. You're still going to throw, but you're not going to do competitive throwing. And someone's going to ask, what's an example? Here's an example. So I wrote a throwing program for a professional baseball player who's coming back. And he pitched all year. He had got banged up a little bit here and there. And so we're putting together a throwing program for him. And this is the throwing program. For the first 2 weeks, he throws a football only. Football. I time it. I don't tell him how far to throw. I don't tell him how many times to throw. I tell him to be athletic with a football. And what we see when that happens is they're down there flinging a football, throwing routes, playing around, being athletic. Okay. After the 2 weeks, then we give them a baseball 3 days a week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they throw a baseball. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, they throw a football. Sunday's off. Now, they can take whatever day off they want, but there's usually 1 day of no throwing. So they get 3 days with a baseball, 3 days with a football. That's for a week to 2 weeks. And then they transition from 3 days with a baseball to 4 days with a baseball, right? And 2 days with a football. Then they go to 5 days with a baseball, 1 day with a football. And then it's optional at that point if they want to throw a 6th day with a baseball. Now, if they're professional in January, February, yes, they have to because they're going to throw 7 days a week. And so we've got to get them geared up for that. Now, let's go back to kids. So this is, we'll just say kids, we'll just say youth. Youth is 13 to 17, okay? At this point in time, if we're saying we're October, I'm telling the youth, hey, you're backing off of throwing. You're going to throw 3 to 4 days a week. I don't care if it's a football or baseball. Okay. You're going to throw 3 to 4 days a week. As we approach Thanksgiving time, you're going to throw 5 to 6 days a week. Once we hit Thanksgiving, we're going to have to start touching a baseball. So that's when I go to the same routine. We go 3 days with a baseball, 3 days with a football, 1 day off. Right. And we just transition them all the way back to essentially their first game, first tournament. Right. And so notice how fall ball usually ends mid-October, and now we're still throwing. I don't mind guys throwing through the off season, but I tell them every time they come in, I say, you're going to see your throwing program, and none of it's going to say 100%. I don't want to see a radar gun in sight. Like there is no competitive juices here. You are not facing hitters. You're not putting somebody in a box to hit, to face them if you're a pitcher. Matter of fact, the pitchers don't even throw off the mound. That's not true. We have got guys throwing off the mound right now, but like, we don't really have a whole lot of mound time. And if anything, it's at a shortened, distance with less intent. And that's almost just to make sure their back and hips to stay in tune with the mounds. But anyways, the point is I tell throwers to throw. Throwers have to throw, but they don't have to throw as hard as they can all season long. Matter of fact, that's how injuries happen. We know that. Spencer can spit off 10 studies in a row that all say bad, 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 ugly, bad, really bad, right? So it's just not a good idea. So, but we do know that the ramp up period is very, very important. So if you haven't been throwing for 2 months, you have to throw before you start competing because otherwise you're going to run an injury as well, which is the reason why we have guys throw, throughout the off season, just non-competitive throws. So that being said, most people listen to the podcast understand I go on tangents. That's one. So let me bring in summary a little bit of what I recommend and what the research and Spencer and I have gone over recommend for off-season throwing programs for baseball, softball players. Here it is. Once your fall season is over, competitive throwing does not start again, typically until the first or second week in January. You're going to throw 3 to 4 days a week. This is for youth, okay? 3 to 4 days a week. They do not have to be baseballs. They can be footballs every day. They could be baseballs. I highly recommend throwing a football 1 day, a baseball the next day, 3 to 4 days a week. Once Thanksgiving hits, now we have to start throwing baseball, okay? Nothing ever before Christmas is hard on a line. Everything's just kind of easy, 70%. After Christmas and January starts rolling around, then we start ramping up. Okay. So that is how things work in regards to the throwing program. So I hope that brings a little bit of clarity. And I know we kind of tangented off the question, which was, hey, what if, I'm getting this conversation from a coach or from someone's telling me that my son or daughter has to specialize, and they have to specialize or they're never going to get a shot. There's an interesting study that's out there that was done by Chris Camp and a few other people. And I will have to say it, full admittance, me, okay? And that is, we looked at this. We looked at high school athletes and baseball pitchers, specifically baseball pitchers, in 4 different locations. Utah, okay, maybe 3. Sorry, guys. I don't remember exactly the details of the study. It's been a minute. So we looked at baseball players in Utah. We looked at baseball players in New York. We looked at baseball players in Minnesota, and I believe one other location down south. And we asked a bunch of questions to them. We took a bunch of measurements, all these type of things. And we basically, one of the things that came out of that was, if you specialized early, did it give you a competitive advantage in regards to performance metrics as you entered into high school and got closer to college? And what we found was that those that specialized were actually at a slight disadvantage than to those that played multiple sports for longer. We found evidence suggesting that better athletes performed better longer. And so that is usually what I tell everybody to do. I've talked to multiple scouts. I've talked to head coaches of Division I programs, junior college programs, and they all say the same thing to me, and that is this. Look, we want to recruit athletes because we can take an athlete and make him into a good baseball pitcher or a good softball pitcher or a good softball first baseman or second baseman or shortstop. But if we take somebody who's only good at throwing and they're not that athletic, it doesn't seem to correlate to higher performances at the highest level. So I tell everybody, if you want to be successful, become a very good athlete first. Then worry about getting really good at one thing. I don't know, Spencer, what do you think? You lived the life for a while, right? I mean, made it to collegiate level baseball. What would you say to that?
I mean, it's hard because I played a year of soccer and a year of football when I was younger, but then after just not being into the sport, my parents were like, it's fine to just play baseball. So like I just played baseball from towards the end of elementary school all the way up through college, and I was playing it year round. So if one of the teams had an off season, I was with a different team during that off season, and I didn't see exactly where the finances were going because luckily I had my parents, but it was baseball year round. Granted, so I grew up in San Diego, so I there was definitely the option to be able to play year round and not have an issue about weather like we do have out here in Utah. But um, I played year round. I had my own sequelae of injuries, overuse injuries to the elbow, to the shoulder, and to the back, taking time off from the sport just because of getting hurt. But I eventually made it to college, but it came with some pretty good injuries throughout the way. I do wish I played at least one other sport growing up, spent more time in it, even if it wasn't at a competitive level, like playing basketball or football a little bit longer or volleyball. That would have been a lot of fun, I think. But that's just, I played baseball all throughout growing up, had the great opportunity to go to college and play baseball. So I can't say anything was wrong growing up, but there are some things I wish I would do differently and I plan on doing differently. But yeah, that's just kind of my route from it.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, there have definitely been people that have been successful with the specialization route, and that again, it's a difficult thing to say, right? And so that's why you and I went on nerd mode on this and tried to find research and what it said and what the research is all saying in regards to giving everybody here the best chance or their athlete the best chance of achieving what it is they want to achieve. If your athlete wants to play in high school ball, I mean, high school ball has gotten really competitive. I mean, some of the especially if you're going to like some of these bigger high schools, like, I mean, to be like a 3 sport athlete in high school right now, depending on what school you're in. And now I'm a little biased in the sense we're in the state of Utah and I don't have a lot of exposure to other schools, but it is difficult to be a 3 sport athlete in a lot of our bigger schools here. because the competition level is so good, and you're not going to play a lot versus other kids. And again, that but if you are able, and if you are able to develop those athletic talents enough to be able to do so, I think it gives you a competitive advantage in regards to the recruiting process too, because I know scouts look for it. I know coaches look for it. If they see that you played basketball and they played softball, they're going to probably take that person over, the person who just played softball for a long time, right? And if talent and performance metrics and outcomes and the way they play the game is fairly equal, they're probably going to take the little bit more athletic kid, or at least the kid that played other sports further along in life. So, okay, so we're gonna like completely change lanes here a little bit, just because I feel like we kind of steered off that direction a little bit, but I think there's a lot of good things that we came up with there. Was there anything in the research, Spencer, that talked about this phenomenon called early succeeders? Did you come across anything along that line?
I did not see anything about early succeeders
So I bring it up
in my.
because, yeah, when I was perusing through a few things and listening to a few people that have been doing this for a really long time, meaning like other performance specialists and PTs and guys that have been in the sport for a really long time and helping kids in sport. There's this concept called early succeeders. And I want to bring it up in this podcast because I think people miss it. And I see it all the time. And it's tough. Early succeeders, it's a phenomenon that was described in a book as well as in, I believe, one other paper that talks about these kids that are ultra successful at a young age. So let's just say 9, 10, and 11, they are just the best players on their teams. Typically also correlated to an early growth spurt, bigger kids, they're just bigger kids at those age groups, and they've matured faster, but maybe they just have a lot of success early on in their careers. And what they found with these early succeeders is that as they continue to go into their sport further, they talked about multiple different sports, but they were playing one sport predominantly. As they got in, there was a significantly high dropout rate with these athletes, even if they were still competing and performing at a fairly high level compared to their peers. So I thought that was really interesting. So what this would look like is, you're playing 12U baseball. You've got a guy who's shaving, and he's just striking everybody out. He's matured early. He's a fantastic player, right? And then 13, 14 comes around. He's still competing, still being able to put up. But now guys are starting to catch up with him. And now he's roughly at around the 15, 16-year-old level, and he's about the same talent level as everybody else. And what we're seeing is that those players, a higher amount of them, not all of them, but a higher amount of them just stop playing. They just give up. And it's not that they're not talented enough to continue. It's not that they got injured and they gave up. They literally just were done. And they use the term burnout. And I'll be honest, I don't think it's burnout. I think that they had such a high level of success early, and they didn't fail enough when they were younger, that failure becomes a very, very big problem to them. And that is exactly what the paper describes as well. It's just these ultra performers expect their expectations go really, really high. But when the competition level catches up to them, again, even if they're performing at a fairly high level, the expectation level is so high to them that it's just not even worth participating in the sport. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this happens all the time. I've seen it already this year. I've seen it in 3 different players this year. And I see it in the youth ranks as well. I mean, I have youth, young kids, 9-year-olds, a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old. I see it happening. And the reason I want to bring it up is because I want parents to be aware of this phenomenon. And a lot of parents are like, look, we're going to go out and find the best team to be on. And these teams that just never lose, right? They go 40-0 or 35-2, or, even like if they're still like 20-10, barely losing, and they're just smoking teams, all this kind of stuff. They're like, yeah, they're on the best team. They never lose and all this kind of stuff. There is some really interesting research, part of which is this early succeeders, that indicates that kids are on those teams do not fare well later on in their athletic careers. And it is something that I believe parents have a lot of control over. I don't think it's good to be on a team that never wins, but to be on a team that wins and loses is, I think, a really, really important thing for parents to understand. It's okay if your kid's not on the best team because they need to learn to fail. They need to learn to lose. They need to learn to win, but they need to learn both. Because when they do that, then they set their own expectations at a level that is appropriate, that will continue to promote and encourage athletic development over the lifespan or until those higher end levels, right? I found it really interesting because I've seen it from those players that are coming out of 10U to go into 12U in regards to softball, from 10U to 12U. They're the best players on their team at 10U, and they hit 12U, and all of a sudden they're not. They really struggle. And unless there's a good coach or the parents are involved and they've got it figured out, they really struggle with the jump because all of a sudden there's girls around them that are just better, right? And I hate seeing players leave the sport because they were put in an environment where they were going to fail in the long term no matter what they did, because they won so much as a kid that now all of a sudden they're chronically disappointed because their expectations were improperly managed. And as a parent, I think we can manage that. So this early succeeder thing is a real thing, and it flies under the radar, even though I think all parents experience it. I think a lot of parents will look up like, oh, I know a kid who's just like that. And I'm like, yeah. And if that kid had probably been, played on a team where they maybe lost a little bit more, or they weren't the best player in the team and they were always the one that was having to work really hard, those are the players that seem to make it to higher levels and continue on. Spencer, did you read anything about late bloomers?
I didn't. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, I think. So like the late bloomers, correct me if I'm wrong, but um I think I was almost a little bit of a late bloomer, like going through a growth spurt, going through puberty a little bit later. And so I didn't really pick up in my skill level and my athletic development until more towards high school. And that's when I started getting recruited. Like I've had people around me in San Diego who were getting recruited early high school, like the first couple of years, and I got recruited my senior year, trying to figure out where to go to school, what to do, and then I got this opportunity that popped up. So like the late bloomers is maybe not starting out as well as some of those either early succeeders, the kids that do really good when they're younger and then kind of taper off, but the late bloomers maybe going through puberty a little bit later, growing a little bit later, but then also still having that chance with um, like proper motivation, being able to still work hard, being able to still get the job done and still practice and develop, just being able to work through it and move on to the next stage.
Yeah, late bloomers are kind of a fun thing, and it ties into a concept that I don't know if we have time to talk about on this podcast, and that is this age effect based on your sports, the age turnover time, right? So if it's birth year, January, if you were born January 2nd of that year, of the year, and it's a birth year sport, then you are going to be the oldest player on your team every time you play, right? But if you were born in that same year, but you were born December 31st, you will always be the youngest player on your team. Now, I always say, but your teammate may be that January 2nd birthday, right? Or your opponent may be that January 2nd birthday, which means they have like 364 days of maturation, skill development, body type changes, all of those things that are working essentially in their favor, but you're a year behind them. That's a really tough thing to ask of a lot of these athletes. And if you actually go look at the research, there's definite research suggesting that if you're born in certain calendar months, depending on the sport, whether it's a birth year or like, a calendar year or whatever the heck they call it, the school year or whatever, right? That there's more of a higher preponderance of kids that make it to the next level based on those months. And it's because they're the ones that are at those prime ages where they can be seen, where they are the best at the times they can be seen. And, they just get more opportunities because they're at the right time, born at the right time. And I always say you can control that as a parent. It, can be tough, but at the same time, sometimes you can't. But the interesting part is that if you have someone who has equal ability, say that someone was born on January 2nd, the other person was born December 31st, and they're fairly equal in regards to their performance output, the research would suggest you should take the December 31st kid because that kid is probably going to outperform the January 2nd kid more often in the future. And that's just what the research says. And I don't think it was like an overwhelmingly thing, but if you're a coach and you're looking at two kids that were fairly close in athletic ability, but one was a little bit younger than the other one, you take the younger one because that one, according to the research, has more of a long-term improvement and performance benefit than the older one does. And I don't know why. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. It's just something I wanted to touch base with parents. Like, yeah, birth time of year when you were born, depending on your sport, it matters. I mean, go talk to anybody who's a hockey fan that when they were doing birth year, and you go up against somebody who's born in January, you're born in December. They're a foot taller and 20 pounds heavier, and and it's time to check. It's like it's not going to go well. It's football's the same thing, but they have linemen, they X down, that kind of stuff. Hockey, they don't. It's just age. You're like, oh, that's gonna be rough. You're always going to be a year behind everybody, and this is kind of how it works. But anyways, so all right, I think we've covered a lot of good points. I want to talk about one more thing, and then we'll have this like little lightning round. There's one thing, in your opinion, and then using the knowledge that you have, and in regards to the physical therapy knowledge, but also the research that you've done in regards to this, what do you feel like the purpose of sport in youth athletics, youth meaning 18 and under, what is the purpose of sport?
I think the purpose of sport is just to, I mean, get the kids outside, get them moving around, performing in a very easy way, exercise. Because I think the hardest thing as kids to do is to go to a gym and do pull-ups, do push-ups, squats, whatever we want them to do. I think it's very hard to get a kid to have the motivation and just go to the gym. I think sport is a great way to get the kids to be active. I mean, there's so many studies that are just talking about letting the kids play, getting them to participate in sport, exercise, have fun. I think the psychosocial benefit is crazy good with getting them in a team sport, getting them to make friends that way, learn how to be a team player. I mean, it teaches you, being in a team sport teaches you so much about how to be a better person, how to be a good team player. That's not just useful for your specific sport, but it's useful for when you grow up and you have to work and do a team project, or if you've got to work for people, work with people, or lead people. I think it really teaches you just life aspects. And there was a study that was showing how, I think it was the last 15, 20 years, but the amount of kids participating in even just single sport participation is down, and the number of kids, especially boys, participating in multiple sports is also down. So there's less people participating in sports than when there was 20 years ago, which is, I think there's a lot of things that have to do with it, but I mean, participating in sport was one of the things that it got me outside. It got me lifelong friends. I mean, every single groomsman I had at my wedding, there were people I played baseball with growing up. I mean, I've got my best friends playing baseball, playing in sports, having fun, just growing with them.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, and I think a lot of people would agree. To add my answer to that same question, like why do we play sport, right? This is coming as from a parent and a professional, and that is you got to look at, as kids are growing, as parents are a lot of our job is to provide them an environment where they can learn without substantial and catastrophic failure. And so they've got to learn these lessons about how to deal with adversity, how to deal with things that may not go their way. And as youth, that's the best time to develop it, but they can't fail these, massive failings. The penalty can't be death, dismemberment, or, homelessness. I mean, those are tough things. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel for all youth that may be dealing with those things, but sport provides us an opportunity to provide an environment that is forgiving enough that when they lose, they can learn the lesson, but they can pick themselves back up and continue on. Right. That's one reason I think sports is just it's a great teacher. Failure is the best teacher, so long as that the the consequence of failure isn't going to be permanent, right? The other thing is that, I mean, I don't know about you, but in sport, Spencer, but I mean, my work ethic, I've always felt like I've had a good work ethic. I asked my dad about it one time. I was like, how's my work ethic as a kid? And he was like, it depends on the day. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But then I learned, like, hey, if I put effort into something, like all of a sudden I'm able to do things a lot better than some of these other kids, and I can participate a little bit better. It's more fun because I do better. So I learned that hard work is a big deal. And then most of the time it's going to pay off. And so I learned to work hard and understand that those are principles that are going to carry on into adulthood. If you learn that hard work does pay off as a youth, then that's just going to help you be a more successful adult, more successful human. Playing on team sports, and there's a whole nother tangent we could go on in regards to like team sports versus individual sports and those type of things. But I mean, our world is a world of relationships, and we need to be able to make friends and to be able to talk to people and work with people. And I mean, there's no better way to do it in sport and trying to figure out how to be on a team and be a good teammate. And those lessons just continue on throughout life. Just being able to relate to people, understanding that sometimes your role is not the role you thought it was going to be, but to be able to take on a role to be successful in a business team or a role in your family, of being a father or a wife or those type of things, right? And so those things, teaching you to be, a good team player and a good teammate is something that I think sport has taught a lot of people, myself for sure. I always say, I mean, I don't know how many times you heard this, Spencer, but like you show up early, you stay late, and you do what's asked of you. If not, you do more than what's asked of you. I don't know if I've ever seen that equal failure long term. You know what I mean? Like I've never seen that equation end up to be like failure, unless you overdo it. And then time, I always say like it's, get early plus stay late plus, do more than is asked of you. But if you change those to times, numbers, maybe it's too much, it's workaholism, and then you got problems, right? So, but the idea is like, if you understand that doing those little things that sport kind of teaches you inherently, that's going to make you a successful adult as well. And again, I think I just come back around to it of like, again, growing up is about learning, and failure is one of the best teachers we have. And sport is a great place to fail where the consequences really aren't going to be overly damaging. And so I think my reason for purpose of sport, the reason why my kids in sport, besides just to develop athletic talents, to make sure that they stay healthy and strong and are a good functioning physical adult into adulthood, but so that they can understand these life lessons and teach them at a youth level so that they'll continue to be successful as adults. So great answer, Spencer. I liked your answer. Okay, here we go. We're going to go lightning round. Okay. So those are the questions that we get from clients all the time, but we can't use these long-winded answers that we just gave, right? We're going to kind of come to a summary of what we believe, right? So I'm going to hit you with a question. You're going to answer, then I'm going to answer, and we're not really allowed to elaborate. You get like a sentence with maybe a comma, but definitely no multiple periods, okay? So should youth athletes, youth meaning 18 and under, specialize in one sport before the age of 13?
No, the risk of injury and burnout and athletic performance does not support it.
Awesome. My answer is also no, mainly because the amount of athletic exposures that you will get at that age while not playing other sports will be dramatically lower than everybody else and will put you behind all of those other youth that are participating in other sports. Okay, that was good. Question 2. I think we got this. I was a little worried that we were going to go off the reservation with this. So, second question. Should youth athletes 18 and under, should youth athletes participate in a sport that goes year round?
I'm going to say no. It doesn't give us or the youth the opportunity to participate in multiple sports to become a better athlete that will help them in the long term.
Awesome. So I was totally hoping you and I would have different answers, and we got one already. So my answer, yes, I think it's fine if they participate in a sport that goes year round, so long as a part of that year round process is a non-competitive process, preferably maybe around 2 to 3 months. So that's good. That's a good answer though. I get it. But you had a great answer to that. Okay. Third question that I want to ask is, at what age should youth start competing in competitive athletics?
Ooh, I'm going to say between 8 and 10 years old. That's when they'll start to, I think that's when they can truly compete at a level that's beneficial to them.
I would say on average around 9 to 10, and mainly because the athletes that are they're not going to be able to play at a level with other athletes that will and continue to improve their talent. And I feel like that requires explanation, but I'm not allowed to give it. So there you go. 9 to 10. Okay, next question. Should youth compete in two or more competitive athletic sports? So being on competitive teams, more than two sports, two or more sports.
I'm gonna say yes, as long as they're two or more different sports. So I'm gonna say yes. I think the benefit is good, and the performance results that you will get from it is going to be beneficial in the long term.
I would also say yes if you can afford it. And if you have coaches that are open to the idea of those athletes playing multiple sports. All right, last question. It's more of an open-ended question. You get 3 periods with this one. Okay. You're in an elevator. You're talking to somebody on the way to the top floor or down to the bottom floor. It doesn't really matter. You're not getting out. They're getting out. They're talking to you about their baseball player. And they say, okay, well, if you had to do it, and you say you have a son and your son is playing baseball, how would you help your son give him the best chance of playing collegiate level baseball?
I would have them play another sport to diversify their athletic performance and experience. I would have them go to the gym, working out and getting better in an environment like that. And I would have them work on their mental game through just different challenges and different ways to improve it so that they can be better inept at working or dealing with adversity that comes along with the sport of baseball.
It's a good answer. I didn't even think about mental aspect, but that it's massively important. Mental aspect of
Yeah.
baseball. Mental aspect of any sport, to be honest. And it
Hmm.
teaches life lessons. Okay, my answer to the same thing. So I tell my kids that I want to play as many sports as possible, as long as possible, that I want them doing 2 workouts in the gym, weight training twice a week, starting at the age of 11 or whenever they're interested, forever, essentially as long as they can. Awesome.
Hmm.
Well, Spencer, any other thoughts you want to give to everybody before we end the podcast today?
We hammered a lot of crucial, important topics that we have definitely heard in the clinic a lot. I mean, we talked to a client about a lot of this stuff, what was it, yesterday or the day before that? So I feel like it's something that gets brought up a lot, especially since parents are always trying to do the best for their kids and try to figure out how to get them to the next level, even if the kid's not even thinking about that yet. Or maybe every kid has the dream of being a professional baseball player or an Olympic athlete. I think it's just something that parents are always trying to help facilitate, especially if that's their goal at the time.
Yeah, I agree. We definitely have covered a lot, and I appreciate all your insight. And I definitely want to say, it's been a pleasure having you as a student. You've done a great job. Your knowledge is going to take you really far. Your ability to take kind of these advanced level concepts and break them down and try to make them so that we can use them is something that's going to be a great strength of yours in the future. And I appreciate all you've done for me as well as Athletic Potential. And not that I'm like wishing you farewell right now, but when you move on, I wish you good luck. And you can always look back and reach out to me, use a resource. But I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank everybody else for listening to the podcast today. And I can tell you right now, one of the things that we do at Athletic Potential is exactly that. We not only work on the physical aspect and performance aspects, keeping your kids healthy, but also getting them healthy if they're not. But we also have an immense network that we work with in regards to mental coaches, in regards to actual coaches themselves. And we can ask a lot of these questions that you may have and give you guidance on how to proceed forward and giving your athlete the best chance of making it to the next level, whatever that is. So I appreciate everybody for coming out, listening to the podcast. Please rate and review. Tell your friends. We appreciate everybody coming today, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks. Everybody, just want to say thank you for listening to the Athletic Potential Podcast. If you do have questions for the podcast, please visit the website, www.athletic-potential.com/podcast. You'll find a button there to ask your question. Please input your information and your question, and we will answer any and all questions we get. And thank you again for listening. If you do get a chance, please rate and review the podcast. And until next time, thanks.